Hey guys, tonight we're drifting back to a time of stiff collars, stricter manners, and an almost pathological fear of physical comfort. The Victorian era. You're in the city of Bath, England. Rain taps gently at the windows, gas lamps flicker in the distance, and the cobblestones beneath your boots are still slick from the afternoon drizzle. You're wearing layers of wool naturally, because there's no such thing as too many waistcoats in 1861. But it's not the weather or your soggy hems that bother you tonight. It's your back. The ache starts between your shoulder blades, creeps down like a passive-aggressive butler, and settles in the small of your spine with all the grace of a sack of bricks. You shift, you sit, you perch on the edge of a stiff wooden chair that feels suspiciously like a punishment. There's nothing you can do to get comfortable, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is as you drift off. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've wandered into the sitting room of a modest but tastefully appointed townhouse in Bath's quieter quarter. It smells of lavender and coal smoke. The walls are lined with framed silhouettes and the occasional, nervous-looking oil painting of someone who probably disapproved of your boots. You're greeted not by a maid or a parlour assistant, but by the soft clinking of porcelain and a faint voice humming a tune you don't quite recognise. And there she is, Clara Woodley. No fanfare, no dramatic entrance. Just a woman gently lowering herself onto an unusually angled chair, cushioned with, well, at least 6 mismatched pillows, and what looks suspiciously like a rolled-up quilt. Her grey hair is pinned high in that Victorian, I've got things to do fashion, but her eyes, those eyes, suggest she's fought a long war with uncomfortable furniture and has absolutely had enough. Clara Woodley isn't famous. No statues bear her likeness. No museums hang her portrait. In fact, if you ask a modern furniture historian about the reclining chair, odds are they'll rattle off a few American patents. Maybe mumble something about a dentist chair from Ohio, and move on. But you get to see the moment it all began. Clara isn't trying to be an inventor. She's just trying to read a Wilkie Collins novel without her neck cramping up. She shifts again in her makeshift cushion throne. With one hand, she tugs a side pillow into place behind her elbow. With the other, she retrieves a folded knitted shawl and wedges it between her lower back and the chair frame. Her ankles rest on a stool that's suspiciously propped up on 2 bricks and an old cookbook. She sighs gently, like someone who has finally tricked their bones into cooperating. You imagine the sensation, a soft sinking, a quiet alignment of vertebrae, the kind of comfort modern orthopedic specialists still haven't perfected. You also notice that her guests, 2 of them, both overdressed and trying not to stare, are sitting bolt upright on matching mahogany chairs that look like they were designed by someone who hated joy. You feel it, don't you? That silent tension. The rules of Victorian society are many, and comfort is not one of them. See, in this era, sitting is not just sitting, it's a performance. There are manuals, actual printed books, on how to properly perch with moral posture. Slouching is a sign of weak character. Cushions are tolerated, but only in moderation. And if your chair dares to lean back too far, well, someone might faint out of sheer propriety. Historians still argue whether the Victorians were genuinely obsessed with upright sitting, or if they were just really good at pretending to be uncomfortable for the sake of appearances. Either way, Clara has decided to opt out of the chair-based suffering, and that's where you find yourself, at the birthplace of rebellion, disguised as rest. Outside, the rain softens to a drizzle. Inside, Clara adjusts one last pillow, closes her eyes for a brief moment, and then smiles. Not broadly, just a gentle lift of the mouth, the kind that says, "Ah, there it is." One of the overdressed guests clears her throat. "Clara, dear, is that safe?" Clara doesn't open her eyes. "Safer than walking about with a spine like a picket fence?" The other guest chuckles, then immediately stifles it, as if laughter might dislodge her corset. And that, right there, is the seed. Not the blueprint for a factory-made reclining chair. Not a draft submitted to a patent office. Just a woman who wanted to nap without dislocating anything. A woman who prioritized comfort in a time when women were supposed to prioritize, well, everything else. There's something gently radical about that, isn't there? You lean back in your mind, picturing an odd chair, no gears, no levers, just an evolving pile of household objects, configured through stubborn trial and error. And yet, in that humble nest of cushions, something extraordinary is happening. A crack is forming in the rigid world of Victorian domestic design, and a certain widow in Bath is about to pry it open with a well-fluffed bolster pillow. So stay put, get comfortable, because this is the kind of story that doesn't gallop ahead. It reclines, slowly, thoughtfully, like Clara herself. You stay seated, quiet, as Clara opens her eyes again and lifts a teacup with a practiced grace. Her fingers are steady despite the persistent tremor of age, and the porcelain clinks gently as it meets the saucer. Just once. No spill, no fuss. She doesn't look at you directly, but somehow you feel she knows you're watching. Mrs. Clara Woodley. The name itself doesn't suggest invention. It suggests knitted shawls, marmalade spoons, and letters signed with "Your humble servant." But that's only on paper. In person, Clara is made of something altogether more deliberate. She's one of those women the world didn't quite know what to do with. Widowed too young, too educated for embroidery circles, too clever to spend her days hosting afternoon teas with women she can't stand. She married for love, at least, that's what she claims, with a glint in her eye and a small shrug. Her late husband, Harold Woodley, was a solicitor of moderate talent but great fondness for cigars and spontaneous piano recitals. He died quietly one spring afternoon, right in the middle of polishing a doorknob. According to Clara, that was rather fitting. It's been 8 years since Harold's passing, and Clara has filled her days with books, brisk walks, and increasingly suspicious modifications to her furniture. She doesn't see herself as eccentric, not really, but when her friends come calling, she's always prepared for the look. That gentle eye squint people do when they see a chair that appears to be wearing a quilt and possibly half of a drapery rod. Still, Clara doesn't flinch. She simply smiles, offers lemon biscuits, and proceeds to recline with alarming precision. The neighbours gossip, of course. They say she's a woman of opinions, which in Victorian English is the polite way of saying we can't figure her out and it's making us nervous. They also whisper about her reading habits, novels, not scripture, French ones sometimes, books with female protagonists who dare to think and sit sideways on settees. But what sets Clara apart, really, is that she dares to not suffer unnecessarily, a trait you'd think more people would admire, but here we are. She doesn't talk about her joints, her back, her stiff knees. She simply acts. You watch her rise from her quilted contraption, slowly, yes, but with far more grace than her guests muster from their parlour torture devices. She fluffs a pillow, adjusts a stack of old books beneath one leg of the chair to create what she calls the proper tilt, and then settles back down. Her maid, Agnes, glides silently through the room and gives you a knowing glance. "She's added another cushion, hasn't she?" she murmurs as she dusts the piano keys. Clara hears her and doesn't even blink. "For every ache, a cushion," she says. It's practically scripture. Historians still argue whether Victorian women were genuinely as resigned to discomfort as the furniture suggests, or if they simply found ways to resist without anyone noticing. Clara, she resists loudly. Softly, yes, but loudly. One summer, she famously refused to host a garden party because the wrought iron chairs were, in her words, designed by a man who never sat in his life. Another time, she sent back an entire settee to a London upholsterer with a note reading, "Lovely design, but please advise why it feels like penance." That note now lives in her kitchen drawer, slightly tea-stained but preserved, because Clara considers it one of her finest written works. Today, though, She's not writing letters. She's sketching. You peek over her shoulder and see the beginnings of something curious. A rectangle, slightly tilted, arrows pointing to joints, scribbled notes in the margins like too steep, feels like sliding into hell. It's not exactly engineering, but it's definitely not embroidery. She sips her tea again, and this time she finally looks at you. Tell me, she says quietly, why is it that every improvement made by a woman is either ignored, stolen, or considered indecent? You hesitate. She waves her hand. It's rhetorical. I already know the answer. Outside, the drizzle returns, softer than before. The fire pops once in the hearth, and you shift in your seat, still very upright, still very aware of how badly you'd like to try her chair. Go on then, she says, as if reading your mind. Try it. You do. You ease yourself into the quilted madness, and suddenly feel like every vertebra just exhaled. It's not perfection. Your left elbow dangles awkwardly, and one cushion squeaks with alarming cheerfulness. But it's better, much better. You understand now. This isn't laziness. This is genius with batting and buttons. She smiles. Harold used to say my taste in furniture was impractical. You ask, and what did you say back? I said, Harold, so is wearing a cravat while polishing doorknobs. You both laugh softly. It's the kind of moment that lingers, unexpectedly intimate, gently rebellious, perfectly padded. And it's here, reclining slightly in a Bath townhouse with the rain tapping gently overhead, that you witness a shift, not in technology, not yet, but in mindset. Comfort, once a guilty pleasure, is now becoming a quiet protest. One woman, one oddly shaped chair, and a future she can't yet imagine, but has already set into motion with every stitched cushion and well-timed sigh. The next morning arrives as it always does in Bath, grey and a little damp, as if the sun isn't quite sure whether it's worth the trouble. You find yourself back in Clara's home before breakfast, drawn in by the comforting smell of boiled oats and coal smoke. The parlour is quiet, save for the soft thud of Agnes repositioning a footstool and the whisper of fabric as Clara adjusts her morning shawl. She's already seated, of course she is, nestled into her now evolving creation. There's a new addition, a thin wooden slat, discreetly wedged behind a cushion, lifting the backrest a touch more. She notices you noticing. It needed spine, she says. Like me. There's something new in the air this morning, not just the faint vanilla of warming scones, but a hint of purpose. Clara isn't just tinkering anymore, she's measuring, eyeballing angles. She's even borrowed her neighbour's carpenter's rule, though she insists it smells of pipe smoke and misplaced confidence. Today, you're accompanying her on a short walk, not for air, but for inspiration. The furniture shop down on Pulteney Street has just received a new shipment of French chaise lounges. Clara, naturally, is sceptical. As you stroll beside her, parasol in hand, she points out the worst offences. Narrow seats, ludicrous button placements, and a faint obsession with clawed feet. Why, she muses aloud, do chair designers insist on pretending we're all Roman senators reclining on leopard pelts? I just want to read without requiring chiropractic intervention. She stops in front of a window display. A reclining settee imported from Paris sits proudly behind the glass. Velvet, gilt trim, a price tag that could feed a family for a month. Clara gives it a long appraising stare. That, she says, is a beautiful lie. Inside, the clerk tries to sell her on the boudoir appeal. Clara pretends to sneeze when he says sensuous upholstery. You do your best not to laugh. She leaves empty-handed, but oddly energized. Back at home, the chair is waiting like a loyal hound. Clara slips back into it, sighing with the contentment of someone who has definitively not been sensuously upholstered. She pulls out a small notebook and begins to sketch again. This time, you notice the outline of hinges, a separate footrest, even, dare we say it, a sliding mechanism. She's not just modifying now, she's designing. Historians still argue whether Clara ever knew what she was doing was invention. Some say she was merely adjusting her surroundings to suit her body. Others suggest she was deliberately tinkering with the aesthetics of power, subverting domestic expectations from inside the drawing room. What we do know is this: the sketches she made, folded neatly inside a leather-bound book now housed in a minor museum in Wiltshire, contain ideas that wouldn't appear in patent offices for another 20 years. She stares into the fire as she draws, murmuring her thoughts aloud. The problem with current chairs, she says, is they make assumptions, that people want to sit still, that people are shaped like fence posts, that rest must always appear industrious. You offer a gentle, which Clara interprets as encouragement. But what if, she continues, a chair could move with you, not against you? What if it anticipated discomfort and gently caught it mid-air, like a falling teacup? You nod, trying to picture this. It sounds like science fiction in crinoline, she smiles faintly. I once saw a beetle curl perfectly into a cabbage leaf. That's the shape I want. From the corner of the room, Agnes snorts. Maybe you should ask the beetle to draw it. Oh, I did, Clara replies, without missing a beat. But it demanded royalties. You laugh, and even Agnes allows a grin. The rest of the day passes in what might be called industrious idleness. Clara works quietly, making notations like mustn't pinch thighs and avoid trapping skirts. She experiments with rolling a bolster in old quilt batting to create a more forgiving lumbar support. She frowns at the result, muttering, still punishing, like sitting on a disapproving ant. By afternoon, the sun finally makes an attempt at existing. Light filters through lace curtains and lands gently on the chair, her chair. Clara tests the new arrangement, shifts her hips, rotates her ankles, and settles in with a pleased grunt. Better, she declares. You realise something as you watch her. This chair, it's not just about comfort, it's about control. In a world where women are told when to sit, how to sit, and often whether they're even allowed to be in certain rooms, Clara's recliner is a quiet act of reclamation. You ask her if she's thought about showing it to someone, perhaps one of the local cabinet makers. She arches a brow. What would they know about the curve of my spine? Let them sit in corsets for a week, then we'll talk. Still, later that evening, she asks you to help her trace the outline of the latest version onto butcher paper. Just in case, she says, pretending not to care. But you notice how carefully she rolls up the finished draft and tucks it inside a drawer. That night, after she's gone to bed, you linger in the parlour, the fire's low, casting long shadows over the half-curled sketches and carefully misaligned cushions. You ease yourself into the recliner one more time, and for a moment you forget the century. You forget the rules. You just sink. By the time summer leans into autumn, Clara's recliner has evolved into something halfway between Victorian respectability and mad genius. It now features not only cushions and hinges, but a laver repurposed from an old butter churn no less, that adjusts the backrest with a satisfying thunk. You suspect it may have once startled a cat clean out of the room. Clara, for her part, looks increasingly pleased with her contraption. She's begun referring to it, rather grandly, as the restorative apparatus. The name makes Agnes roll her eyes and mutter something about naming furniture like it's a royal baby, but Clara doesn't mind. If anything, she's rather enjoying the melodrama of it all. This morning, you're helping Clara rearrange the furniture in the parlour, ostensibly to make space for a new fern stand, but really so that the recliner can sit proudly in the sun's path. It deserves a bit of warmth, Clara says, patting the armrest like it's a beloved dog. It's done more for my joints than Dr. Pemberton ever managed. The fern is summarily relocated to the corner. The recliner now commands the room, angled just so, in a shaft of light that makes the old fabric look nearly regal. Clara settles in with a book and a victorious sigh. But the peace doesn't last long. This afternoon, the Ladies' Benevolent Society is due for tea, a group Clara has been honorarily ignoring for the better part of a decade. but one must keep up appearances, and so the good china is out, the lemon curd is stirred, and the biscuits are stacked with suspicious precision. Agnes, arranging the tea tray, leans over and whispers, "You know they'll talk about the chair." Clara raises an eyebrow. "They talk about everything. I might as well give them something accurate for once." The women arrive in flurries of rustling skirts and cautious glances. Mrs. Penelope Havisham, the de facto queen of thinly veiled judgment, is the first to notice the recliner. She stares at it the way one might study a hedgehog wearing spectacles. "What a curious piece," she says. Clara doesn't miss a beat. "It's terribly modern, isn't it?" The others murmur politely, sinking stiffly onto Clara's more conventional chairs. You can see it in their eyes, envy thinly disguised as concern. They want to try it, but can't be the first to break rank. Eventually, Mrs. Prunella Beavers, a widow of exceptional bluntness, speaks up. "Well," she declares, "I shall try the damn thing if no one else will." And she does, the moment she sits back and the footrest lifts, slightly lopsided, but charmingly so. She gasps, not in horror, in relief. A beat passes, then another. "My heavens," she breathes. "It's like being embraced by a sympathetic cloud." Clara smiles modestly. "It's something I've been fiddling with, not for sale, of course. Merely a diversion." Prunella doesn't move. "Well, you better patent the diversion before my cousin Edward sees it. He's always stealing ideas and pretending they're his own. Once claimed he invented the umbrella." The mood of the room shifts. What began as curiosity has turned into grudging admiration. The recliner, once a source of amusement, is now the centre of attention, and not just because of its surprising comfort. There's something subversive about it, something quietly radical. A chair that moves, that bends to you, in a world that demands women accommodate everything else. Historians still argue whether moments like this, tea with the benevolent society, marked the turning point for Clara's invention. Some believe it was simply a quirk among friends. Others insist it was here, in this very room, that whispers turn to buzz. You notice the way Penelope watches Prunella recline. There's calculation in her expression. She's doing mental measurements, thinking of parlours in Kensington and husbands with stiff backs. Clara, meanwhile, pretends to be absorbed in her tea. That night, after the last of the ladies departs with a politely veiled "how novel" or "quite the contraption," Clara sits down heavily in her chair and kicks up the lever. The recliner creaks once, then settles. You ask if she's going to build a second one. "Oh no," she says, eyes twinkling. "The second would be a betrayal. This one's got my spine in its memory." Still, you notice her glance at the sketchbook again, and you get the feeling, deep in your relaxed shoulders and increasingly spoiled lower back, that she's thinking about more than one chair now. She's thinking about possibility, about replication, about what happens when comfort becomes contagious. Outside, the gaslights flicker on along the street. Inside, the fire crackles softly, illuminating the curves and levers of Clara's ever-evolving machine. It doesn't look revolutionary, but then neither did Clara at first. Morning in Bath creeps in like a polite apology, soft and slightly damp, with just enough chill to make tea heem like a solution to everything. Today, Clara's recliner sits draped in a tartan shawl, not for warmth, but aesthetic authority, as she puts it. You suspect she's enjoying the theatricality of it all a little more than she lets on. You arrive to find her in her dressing gown, poring over a letter with the intense scrutiny of a general reviewing battle plans. The envelope bears the distinct swirling handwriting of her cousin Edwin, a name Clara usually says with the same tone one reserves for soggy toast. "Edwin wants to visit," she says flatly. "He's heard whispers about the chair." You blink. You hadn't realised word had spread that far. Clara folds the letter slowly. "He's bringing his latest fiancée, the one who thinks phrenology is a dinner topic." You groan. She smiles. "Exactly. The idea that Edwin might try to co-opt her invention sends Clara into what she calls a defensive flurry. The rest of the day is spent reinforcing her sketches, testing alternate lever positions, and, rather ingeniously, experimenting with a locking mechanism that only disengages if you know to lift and slide in tandem. It's not theft-proof, she admits, but it will confuse the smug right off him. By the time Edwin arrives 2 days later, the recliner has been polished within an inch of its life, and bears a folded note on its arm that simply reads, "Not for idiots." You greet Edwin at the door. He's wearing a cravat that looks aggressive. Behind him floats Miss Lillian Pontswell, delicate and delighted by everything in an aggressively whimsical way. The visit begins civilly enough. Biscuits, a few bared comments about city furniture trends. But then Clara guides Edwin into the parlour. He sees the chair. His face does a complicated thing involving surprise, greed, and repressed envy. "Well," he says, walking around it. "Quite innovative." Lillian claps her hands. "Oh, Edwin, do sit in it. You always complain about your lumbago." Clara raises an eyebrow. He might not know how. Edwin, of course, takes this as a challenge. He eases himself into the chair with theatrical caution, fumbling at the sides. "It's firm," he mutters. He finds the lever, yanks it. Nothing happens. He yanks again. Too hard. The footrest lurches out. The back slumps halfway, and Edwin's body follows like a collapsing deck chair. His feet fly up. His tea sloshes. Lillian gasps and claps again, as if she's just witnessed a magic trick. Clara watches, utterly serene. "It responds to subtlety," she says. Edwin rights himself with the dignity of a man who has just fought a piece of furniture and lost. "You should patent this," he mutters, "before someone else does." "Should I?" Clara muses aloud. "That's an awful lot of paperwork for a little comfort." Historians still argue whether Edwin truly intended to steal the design, or simply admired it with his usual parasitic enthusiasm. What's clearer is that Clara's encounter with him marks a shift. Up until now, the recliner has been a personal rebellion, a chair that fits her, a private joy. But Edwin's visit forces the question, what if comfort is a kind of currency? That evening, Clara is unusually quiet. She flips through her sketchbook without drawing. You ask if Edwin rattled her. She shrugs. "Not exactly, but it does make one wonder if all this," she gestures vaguely at the chair, "should remain here, in this room, with only us and Agnes for company." You both sit in silence for a while. Then, with the kind of reluctant resolve reserved for reorganizing spice cabinets and declaring war, Clara opens a fresh page. At the top, in big cursive, she writes, "The reclining chair project. You lean over. That's not terribly poetic." "I'm not selling poetry," she replies. "I'm selling knees that don't scream." For the next few days, everything changes. She starts reading old patent books. She digs through Edwin's discarded trade pamphlets, the one useful thing he's ever produced, and writes to her cousin Margaret in Manchester, who knows a printer with the moral compass of a raccoon, but a good eye for wood grain. She drafts a diagram that includes every detail of the chair's operation, levers, hinges, cushion placements, and yes, even the secret locking mechanism. You watch her revise it again and again, muttering under her breath about legacy and lazy spines. One afternoon, while she's sketching in the garden, a breeze lifts her drawing and deposits it at your feet. You hand it back. She hesitates, then says softly, "Do you think anyone would actually want to use it?" You consider. The chair has made her laugh more, nap more, feel more herself. "Yes," you say. "I think a lot of people might." Clara doesn't answer right away, but the next morning she orders extra ink and a stronger pencil, and the chair, now shined, steadied, and slightly smug, sits by the window like it always belonged there. The sun slants low and warm through the parlour window, catching motes of dust that dance like tiny stage performers in the quiet. You settle beside Clara as she carefully folds the latest batch of drawings and blueprints, the lines crisp, the details precise. These pages are more than paper. they're a declaration of intent, a promise that something small and personal might ripple outward. Clara has enlisted Agnes to help transcribe a letter to Margaret, asking her to connect with a local craftsman willing to create a prototype for wider use. Agnes, who's surprisingly handy with a quill despite her usual complaints about all this scribbling nonsense, leans in, squinting at Clara's tight script. Meanwhile, the recliner waits patiently in its usual spot, armrests polished, springs oiled, cushions plumped, almost like a patient friend. You sit there yourself for a moment, feeling the gentle cradle of its embrace and marvel at how something so simple could seem like a small revolution. Word begins to trickle through baths, parlours and salons. Clara's recliner becomes a topic whispered behind lace fans and over delicate cups of Darjeeling, not because it's some grand invention, no, that would be too brash, but because it offers a little secret comfort in a world that tends to demand so much rigidity. You overhear Mrs. Penelope Havisham at the market remarking, "It's simply scandalous, allowing one to recline like that, such softness in a lady's posture, but I suppose even scandal can be a relief." There's something oddly soothing in the idea of scandal being a comfort, you think, as you listen to the clinking of horse-drawn carriages and the faint rustle of crinoline outside. Clara, however, remains pragmatic. She's less interested in scandal and more in logistics. If it's going to catch on, she says, it needs to be both accessible and discreet. No one wants their neighbours gossiping about the lady who prefers a chaise longue to standing stiff as a willow. The craftsman Margaret recommends is a quiet man named Mr. Pembroke, known for his precision and an inexplicable fondness for nocturnal woodworking. The prototype he begins constructing isn't perfect. Some joints squeak, and the lever mechanism requires a delicate touch, but it holds promise. You visit Pembroke's workshop one foggy afternoon. The smell of freshly cut oak and varnish is thick in the air. He shows you the chair frame, half assembled, and gestures with pride at the moving parts. It's a fine dance, he says. All these levers and hinges must move in harmony, or the whole thing collapses like a bad play. Pembroke's workshop is a cathedral of wood shavings and half-finished projects. You notice a pile of sketches pinned to the wall, some with curious shapes that look like early attempts at adjustable footrests or reclining backs, some bearing a faint resemblance to modern-day chaise lounges. Historians still argue whether these design experiments were truly original or inspired by other reclining furniture of the era. But what's clear is that Clara's vision pushed Pembroke to refine ideas into a form both functional and elegant. Back in the parlour, Clara experiments with upholstery options. She's fascinated by the idea of combining comfort with aesthetics, silk versus velvet, cotton stuffing versus horsehair. She insists on testing each fabric by sitting for hours, sometimes dozing off mid-inspection, mumbling about the importance of cushion diplomacy. At one point, Agnes finds Clara asleep, sprawled in the chair with a half-finished tea and a book sliding from her lap. "You're becoming quite the recliner's mistress," Agnes teases. Clara blinks awake. "It's not so much a mistress as a partner. I trust it with my naps more than I trust my own thoughts." That evening, you both sit quietly as Clara sketches a plan for a modest pamphlet, part instruction, part promotion, and part love letter to the idea that rest is no crime. You wonder if anyone reading it would imagine that this gentle invention could one day help countless people find moments of peace in an increasingly restless world. The recliner waits, patient and poised, like a secret shared between friends. The following weeks blur into a comforting rhythm of sketches, fittings, and endless cups of chamomile tea. Clara's world narrows beautifully to this. The soft creak of wood, the delicate press of fabric, the satisfying click of a lever. It's a small kingdom, and you're a privileged witness. One chilly morning, a letter arrives from Margaret with surprising news. The local printer has agreed to produce Clara's pamphlet. And there's even talk of a small exhibition in Bath's town hall, an opportunity for Clara's invention to be seen by the public, or at least a polite portion of it. Clara reads the letter aloud, voice steady but eyes sparkling. Well, it seems the reclining chair might have an audience after all. You notice a flicker of excitement beneath her usual composed exterior. The thought of public display is as thrilling as it is terrifying. You remind yourself gently that even the most revolutionary ideas often start with a quiet, tentative step. Preparations for the exhibition become a project in themselves. Clara selects the best version of her chair, insists on polishing every surface to a soft gleam, and practices her elevator pitch, which is mostly a series of witty asides about Victorian backs and the tyranny of upright postures. On the day of the exhibition, the town hall buzzes with a polite mix of curiosity and skepticism. You and Clara arrive early, the chair packed carefully in a corner beside a modest sign reading simply, "A new comfort for the modern woman." As the crowd drift in, you observe the familiar dance of polite appraisal. Ladies in high collars and men in waistcoats approach the chair with a mix of amusement and suspicion. You can almost hear the gears turning in their heads. Is this frivolous? Is this useful? Is this scandalous? One elderly gentleman with a monocle that seems to magnify his skepticism tests the chair. He lowers himself carefully, then presses the lever. The footrest rises slowly, and he lets out a surprised chuckle. "Well," he says, "if this is the future, it's a rather comfortable one." A ripple of laughter follows, and Clara's cheeks flush with something between pride and disbelief. Among the visitors is a young woman named Elsie, who lingers by the chair, eyes bright. She tells Clara she's a nurse interested in how the chair might help women recovering from illness, a practical angle that Clara hadn't fully considered. Historians still argue whether Elsie's encouragement influenced Clara's next steps, but it's clear the exhibition opened doors beyond the parlour gossip and polite society. After the event, Clara sits with you in the now quiet town hall, the chair occupying a noble corner like a quiet ambassador. "Do you think," Clara asks softly, "that something as simple as a chair could change how we live?" You smile. Sometimes it's the little things, the ones that make us pause and breathe, that start the biggest changes. Outside, the gas lamps glow like fireflies as evening settles over Bath. Inside, the chair remains a steadfast companion to dreams of comfort and possibility. You settle back in its embrace, feeling the gentle support that Clara dreamed into existence. And you realise that invention isn't always about grandeur. It's often about kindness to the body and to the soul. Days turn into weeks, and the recliner's gentle influence spreads quietly through Bath's drawing rooms and sunlit studies. Clara's pamphlet, modest and unassuming, finds its way into curious hands, some eager, some sceptical, and others simply charmed by the idea of a chair that encourages rest without guilt. You watch Clara field inquiries and invitations with a growing mix of pride and cautious optimism. The idea that she might be on the verge of something more than a private comfort is both thrilling and frankly a little exhausting. One afternoon, Clara receives an invitation to demonstrate the chair at a social gathering hosted by Lady Beatrice Wensley, a woman known for her refined taste and a particular fondness for new inventions. The event promises a curious mix of aristocracy and intellectuals, the kind of crowd where a chair can make or break a reputation. Preparing for the demonstration becomes a ritual. Clara rehearses her explanation of the chair's mechanics, peppered with light humour about the dreaded upright tyranny and the silent rebellion of a good nap. She's determined to charm without alienating. The evening arrives with a crispness in the air and a sky full of stars. You accompany Clara to Lady Wensley's grand townhouse, where the atmosphere hums with polite conversation and the clinking of fine china. The recliner, wrapped in a delicate throw, stands ready in the centre of the drawing room. Clara invites Lady Wensley to try it first, a strategic move, given the lady's status. With the grace of a seasoned performer, Lady Wensley lowers herself into the chair. The soft click of the lever and the slow rise of the footrest draw a collective breath from the assembled guests. She leans back, eyes closing briefly in what seems a rare moment of genuine relaxation. Then with a smile, she declares, "I dare say, this is quite the revelation. Why, it feels as though the chair is encouraging me to forget my social obligations for just a moment." Laughter ripples through the room, easing the initial reserve. One gentleman, a professor of natural philosophy, remarks on the chair's ingenious use of mechanics, sparking a lively conversation about innovation and comfort. Amid the gentle buzz, Clara notices a young woman sketching the chair intently. Miss Harriet Blythe, an aspiring inventor herself, who later shares ideas about adapting the chair for use in hospital wards. Historians still argue whether Harriet's enthusiasm played a crucial role in advancing reclining furniture designs beyond aristocratic parlours, but it's clear that Clara's invention was beginning to inspire a quiet ripple of creativity. As the evening winds down, you and Clara share a moment by the window, watching the soft glow of lamplight fade into the night. "You've done well," you say softly. Clara nods, her eyes reflecting both exhaustion and satisfaction. It's not just about comfort anymore. It's about making space for rest in a world that rarely allows it. You sink into the chair beside her, the cushions welcoming you with familiar warmth. And in that gentle moment, the recliner feels less like an invention and more like a companion, one designed to hold you softly as the world outside spins a little too fast. The seasons shift imperceptibly, and with them the story of Clara's reclining chair continues its quiet evolution. You find yourself reflecting on the curious journey from a simple need for comfort to a small cultural phenomenon, all rooted in the gentle defiance of Victorian norms. In the cosy intimacy of Clara's parlour, she pores over correspondence from women across England who have heard of the chair and are eager to experience its relief. Some letters speak of chronic aches eased, others of stolen moments of peace amid busy lives. It's a chorus of quiet gratitude, each note building into a subtle symphony of comfort. One letter stands out, a note from a lady in Edinburgh who writes of her struggle with insomnia. She describes how reclining in the chair, wrapped in a woolen throw by the fire, has become her nightly ritual, coaxing her into gentle sleep when nothing else could. Historians still argue whether such personal testimonies truly influence the wider acceptance of reclining furniture, but the idea that comfort could be an act of self-care begins to take root. Clara experiments with subtle modifications, inspired by the diverse needs shared in these letters. She adds adjustable headrests, experiments with different fabrics, and even considers the possibility of a reclining chair designed specifically for outdoor use, perfect for garden afternoons under the dappled sunlight. You join her in these quiet afternoons of tinkering, the sounds of distant church bells and the occasional chirp of a sparrow weaving a soothing soundtrack. In a particularly whimsical moment, Clara muses aloud about adding a small pocket for a book or a teacup, imagining a chair that not only cradles the body but holds the small comforts of daily life. As you help test these ideas, you're struck by how the chair becomes less of a static object and more a living space, an intimate nook that invites rest, reflection, and even a bit of mischief. The local newspaper catches wind of the invention and publishes a brief piece praising Clara's ingenious comfort device, sparking curiosity and a gentle buzz in social circles beyond Bath. At a literary salon one evening, Clara listens as a poet waxes lyrical about the noble art of repose, weaving her reclining chair into verses that paint rest as a form of quiet rebellion. You smile, recalling your own quiet moments in the chair, where thoughts wander like lazy clouds, and the world softens around the edges. Yet not all reactions are entirely enthusiastic. Some traditionalists grumble about the decline of proper posture and the dangers of too much ease. Their words echo a familiar refrain, reminding you both that innovation often rides a bumpy road. Still, Clara remains undeterred. If comfort is scandalous, she quips, then let's be a little scandalous together. You can't help but laugh, settling deeper into the chair's gentle embrace as twilight fades tonight. In the quiet companionship of that moment, the world outside seems a little less demanding, and the simple act of reclining feels like a small, victorious sigh. The reclining chair quietly continues its ascent, not with fanfare or trumpets, but with the gentle rustle of fabric and the soft creak of wood, welcoming tired bodies. You notice how its presence begins to influence not only physical comfort, but also subtle shifts in social habits. At a small gathering in a neighbouring town, Clara finds herself seated in the very chair that has become her signature. The conversation drifts lazily from fashion to philosophy, the chair encouraging a more relaxed posture and, perhaps, a slightly looser tongue. You overhear a gentleman remark, "One wonders if such ease might soften the rigid decorum we so cherish, or perhaps remind us of our humanity." This thought lingers, a gentle challenge to Victorian stiffness. Historians still argue whether the reclining chair subtly encouraged a shift toward more casual social interaction, but its presence in salons and parlours suggests it played a role. Clara's correspondence expands, now including suggestions from doctors intrigued by the chair's potential therapeutic benefits. One physician writes about its promise for patients recovering from long illnesses, noting how gentle elevation could improve circulation and ease discomfort. Inspired, Clara collaborates with a local surgeon to explore modifications that might enhance these benefits without sacrificing elegance. You join Clara at the clinic one afternoon, where the chair is tested with patients who find solace in its gentle embrace. Their quiet sighs and relaxed smiles speak volumes about the power of comfort in healing. Outside the medical world, the chair influences domestic routines. Households begin to adopt it as a place for quiet reading, for knitting, or simply watching the rain trace patterns on window panes. You imagine a scene where a young woman curls up in a recliner, a book resting on her lap, while the distant sound of church bells fades into a lullaby. At the same time, Clara experiments with decorative touches, embroidered cushions, delicate tassels, and even subtle floral scents infused into the upholstery, turning the chair into a sensory retreat. A curious rumour spreads that a reclining chair was once used by a famous author during long writing sessions, fueling debates among literary circles about its influence on creativity. You smile at the idea, picturing the author lost in thought, the chair quietly supporting every twist of inspiration. Though some critics remain steadfast in their preference for rigid chairs and upright postures, Clara's invention gains a loyal following who appreciate its blend of function and comfort. As you sink once again into the familiar softness, you reflect on how this simple chair quietly challenged conventions, inviting a gentler, more humane rhythm into daily life. And in that ease, you find a moment of peace, a small rebellion in the shape of a chair. As you settle into the rhythm of these days, you notice the reclining chair's reputation quietly weaving itself into the fabric of Victorian society. It's no longer just a novel curiosity, it's becoming a cherished companion for those who dare to prioritise comfort in a world fixated on posture and propriety. Clara receives an unexpected invitation from a well-respected furniture maker in London, who has heard whispers of her invention. The invitation offers a chance to collaborate on refining the chair for a broader audience, an opportunity Clara greets with cautious excitement. You accompany her on the journey to London, the train's rhythmic clatter, a soothing backdrop to conversations filled with both hope and doubt. Clara shares her vision for a chair that could ease not only the weary body, but the restless mind. a sanctuary in the midst of a bustling city. At the workshop, skilled craftsmen examine the chair, intrigued by its clever mechanics and elegant design. They propose adjustments to improve durability and comfort, including a smoother reclining mechanism and more adaptable cushioning. Amid the hum of woodworking and soft chatter, Clara experiments with different types of wood: mahogany for its rich warmth, oak for sturdiness, and even a hint of cherry for subtle colour. Each choice shapes the chair's character, blending function with a whisper of luxury. You join in testing prototypes, feeling the gentle incline and the subtle support beneath your back. It's clear that this collaboration is more than business. It's a shared belief in the value of rest. Word spreads through London's salons and intellectual circles, where the reclining chair becomes a topic of quiet fascination. Some invite Clara to speak about her invention, curious to hear the story behind the comfort. One evening, at a gathering of progressive thinkers, a spirited debate arises about the role of rest in productivity. Some argue that leisure leads to laziness, while others champion the chair as a tool for rejuvenation and inspiration. Historians still debate how much the reclining chair influenced these shifting attitudes, but it's evident that Clara's invention was part of a larger conversation about balancing work and rest. Meanwhile, Clara continues to receive letters from women across the country, their voices united by a common desire, a space to pause, to breathe, to simply be. In one letter, a woman describes using the chair to soothe her tired hands after long days of embroidery, while another credits it for helping ease the morning stiffness of arthritis. You find yourself marvelling at how a single invention has touched so many lives in quiet, unexpected ways. That night, as you rest in the chair's familiar embrace, you realise comfort has a power beyond the physical, a gentle revolution that invites kindness to oneself in the midst of life's demands. And with that thought, you drift towards sleep, cradled by the soft promise of rest. The following months bring an intriguing twist. A travelling exhibition showcasing innovations across England invites Clara to feature her reclining chair. The prospect of taking her invention beyond familiar circles fills her with a mix of anticipation and nerves, but she accepts, eager to share comfort on a wider stage. You accompany Clara as the exhibition travels from city to city, each new locale adding its own flavour to the story. In Manchester, the chair draws the attention of factory workers longing for brief respite from their demanding shifts. In Cambridge, scholars muse about how a moment of rest might ignite fresh ideas. The chair becomes a silent ambassador for gentle rebellion against the relentless pace of industrial life, inviting weary souls to recline and breathe. At one exhibition stop, a small boy tugs at Clara's sleeve, asking if the chair can make him as tall as his father. She laughs softly and kneels to explain that while the chair won't add inches, it can help him grow stronger by giving his body time to rest. You watch the boy's eyes widen with wonder. Comfort, it seems, is magic enough. In between exhibitions, Clara writes detailed notes on the chair's reception and ideas for future improvements. She dreams of lightweight versions for travellers and even chairs designed for children. One evening, over steaming cups of tea in a quiet inn, Clara reflects on how a simple accident, a desire to ease her aching back, has blossomed into a journey she could hardly have imagined. Historians still debate whether Clara anticipated the full impact of her invention, but her humility and curiosity remain constant. You join her in a walk beneath gaslit streets, the city's hum softened by the night. The reclining chair may be just a piece of furniture to some, but to you both it represents a small, steady hope that rest is not a luxury, but a necessity. As you return to the warmth of the inn, you settle into the chair's soft embrace once more, the world's noise fading into a soothing murmur. In this quiet moment, the chair feels less like an object and more like a gentle promise, a reminder that even in the busiest times, there is always space to pause and breathe. And with that thought cradling you gently, sleep begins to weave its quiet spell. The reclining chair's quiet journey continues to unfold as Clara's story becomes part of a larger conversation about comfort and innovation in Victorian England. You notice how the chair begins to inspire not only practical use, but also a certain cultural poetry, a symbol of rest as a subtle form of resistance. Back in Bath, Clara receives an invitation to contribute an article to a popular women's magazine. Her essay, titled The Gentle Art of Reclining, blends personal anecdote with observations on the importance of rest for the mind and body. You listen as she reads her words aloud, voice soft and thoughtful. In a world that often praises ceaseless activity, I find it a quiet act of courage to recline, to pause, and to honour the body's need for ease. The essay resonates with readers far and wide, sparking letters from women who share their own experiences and dreams of creating small sanctuaries in their homes. Among these letters is one from a woman in India describing a local tradition of afternoon rest called the siesta, and how her family's wooden daybeds bear a striking resemblance to Clara's reclining chair. Historians still debate whether this cross-cultural connection influenced Clara's later designs, but the idea of comfort as a universal language feels deeply true. Clara begins corresponding with the woman, exchanging sketches and stories, broadening her understanding of how rest takes shape across the world. Meanwhile, the reclining chair finds its way into art and literature. A painter captures a serene portrait of a woman reclining with a book, while a novelist describes a character's transformation through moments spent in such a chair. You realise that the chair has transcended its function, becoming a muse for creativity and introspection. At her local theatre performance, a subtle joke about the rebellious recliner brings a ripple of laughter, a gentle nod to the chair's growing cultural presence. Yet beneath the light humour lies a serious acknowledgement. Rest is a powerful force, quietly shaping lives and stories. Clara reflects on this during one of your long conversations by the fire. Perhaps, she muses, the chair's greatest gift isn't just comfort, but permission to slow down, to dream, to simply be. You nod in agreement, sinking once again into the familiar contours of the chair, feeling the day's cares soften and dissolve. And as the embers glow low, you find yourself drifting towards sleep, cradled by both history and hope. The years move gently onward, and Clara's reclining chair continues its quiet journey into the hearts and homes of many. You feel the weight of time's soft passage, the way small inventions like this chair ripple through lives, often unnoticed, but profoundly felt. In quieter moments, Clara reflects on the early days, how a simple ache led her to reimagine rest, and how that spark grew into a shared experience. You join her in a workshop, now filled with several versions of the chair, each one telling its own story through the gentle wear of use, the faded embroidery on cushions, the soft creak of hinges. One afternoon, Clara hosts a small gathering of friends and admirers, where the chair serves as a centerpiece, inviting all to relax and share stories. The conversation drifts to how the idea of comfort has evolved, and how reclining chairs have started appearing in unexpected places, libraries, gardens, even train carriages. Historians still debate exactly when reclining chairs became common household fixtures, but Clara's influence is clear in the design and spirit of these pieces. You recall the amusing story of a nobleman who tried reclining in one of Clara's chairs for the first time and promptly fell asleep during an important meeting. A tale retold with affectionate laughter. In these moments, the chair becomes more than wood and fabric. It's a vessel for connection, rest, and a touch of gentle rebellion. Clara shares her hope that future generations will continue to find comfort in the chair's embrace, especially in a world that never seems to slow down. You smile, imagining the countless people reclining quietly, the world fading to a soft hum around them, and as you sink into the chair's familiar shape, the gentle rhythm of breathing and quiet contentment wraps around you. Tonight, like every night, the chair is a soft promise, a quiet place to rest, to dream, and to gently surrender to sleep. Time seems to fold gently around you as the story nears its quiet close. Clara's reclining chair, once a modest experiment to soothe a weary back, has blossomed into a symbol of ease and gentle defiance against the demands of a rigid world. You can almost feel the soft patter of footsteps across polished wood floors, the faint rustle of fabric as bodies find rest. In the final years, Clara's invention finds its way into a variety of spaces, from cosy reading nooks to sunlit verandas, becoming an unassuming companion to countless quiet moments. You imagine a gentle afternoon, sunlight filtering through lace curtains, a soft breeze carrying the scent of blooming roses, and the faint creak of the chair as someone settles in for a peaceful pause. Historians still debate the precise origins of reclining chairs in broader culture, but Clara's name often surfaces in letters, diaries, and whispers of invention, a testament to the humble beginnings of something enduring. Clara herself remains modest, more interested in the comfort of others than in acclaim. She writes in her journal about the simple joy found in offering a place to rest, a small rebellion against the world's rush. You reflect on the gentle humour Clara carried through it all, from her wry remarks about society's obsession with stiff backs, to her cheeky jokes about daring to lean back without scandal. The chair's legacy is not just in its shape or mechanics, but in the permission it quietly grants to breathe, to relax, to find solace in the simple act of reclining. As the day fades into evening, you find yourself once again in that familiar seat, the fabric soft against your skin, the chair's gentle incline cradling your body. The world outside fades softly, replaced by the steady rhythm of your breath and the slow, comforting cadence of history unfolding around you. And now, as you prepare to drift into your own restful sleep, remember this gentle story, a reminder that even the smallest acts of comfort can ripple outward, touching lives in ways both profound and quietly beautiful. So let the chair carry you into dreams, and may your night be as peaceful as a Victorian afternoon, wrapped in the soft embrace of rest. As your eyes grow heavy and the room softens into twilight, know that this story will linger gently, like the last warm glow of a fading sunset. You are wrapped in calmness, cradled by comfort, and invited to rest deeply. Let your thoughts drift like quiet clouds, slowly and peacefully, into the embrace of sleep. Tomorrow will wait, and for now there is only this moment, soft, still, and perfectly serene.